RPGs have changed. Gone are the days of simple turn-based combat with minimal sprite work and text that transcribe the events of battle. With each generation, developers have stepped to the challenge to innovate and push the genre to the next level. Modern RPGs have larger-than-life expansive worlds, deep character development and storytelling, and complex yet refined combat systems. These new RPGs tower over their ancestors and are one hell of a development headache. We all know someone who says things like, "Man, my ideas are so great, I could make an awesome game." You know who you are. Well, I'm here to shine some light on a genre that is a contender for one of the most difficult to create in game development. Making an RPG is hard as f***, and here's why. Before having the first build of a game, meaning something tangible like an alpha or a prototype, you first need to create the game's foundation. This is true for any game and is not exclusive to RPGs. This can include character control scripts, simple enemy AI, a state manager, and other miscellaneous scripts. But the challenging part of RPGs is that they are made up of several moving parts that need to be in place before you can actually get meaningful gameplay. For the sake of understanding, let's create two example video games. The first game will be a Mega Man clone we'll call Giga Boy. Giga Boy has the same actions as Mega Man, so he can jump, shoot, and switch between his special weapons. To get a working prototype for Giga Boy, here's what we'll need. A character control script. This handles movement, shooting, and weapon switching. It's a pretty simple script, and a beginner can get this much done in a day or two with online tutorials. This script can also hold player damage. Next, we'll need a simple enemy AI. In most of these platformers, the enemy AI is fairly simple. They typically have two main states, patrol and attack. In patrol, they'll idle back and forth, while in attack, they'll chase the player around. Which state they're in usually depends how close or far you are to the enemy. After that, we'll need a UI manager. This is a script that updates the information shown on the HUD. In this case, it's simply the HP and energy values. Lastly, we'll need a level design. The level design can be really simple and made up of gray boxes with colliders on them. With these four core assets, you'll have the building blocks for Giga Boy. The fortunate part of building a platformer is that the majority of game engines already have built-in physics engines that work well with simple platforming. The biggest challenge in creating Giga Boy wouldn't be developing the foundation in the game engine, but rather creating interesting abilities, enemies, and level designs. Now let's create another prototype, this time in RPG, and we'll also use the NES era as a baseline again. Let's create a Final Fantasy clone titled Last Legend. And to keep it simple, we'll only focus on the system's revolving combat and omitting details like storytelling and world building. We'll use a lot of the same scripts as we used before, namely a character script, a simple AI, and a UI manager. The big difference here will be the use of a battle script. The battle script will contain the logic and decision trees for combat. The system will also need to consider what to do if an enemy target dies. The script will also handle battle calculations and determine the outcome of each action. We will also use this script to check for win-loss conditions. Lastly, the battle system will determine the attack order based on the unit speed stat, plus or minus a random modifier to give a small RNG element. So far, both Giga Boy and Last Legend have roughly similar core scripts, but one is clearly more complicated than the other, namely the battle system. Giga Boy's combat basically revolves around shooting a projectile, and if that projectile hits an enemy's collider, the enemy takes damage. Where Last Legend revolves around a long decision tree of condition checks, which are very prone to bugs and exploits if the developers are not careful. The main difficulty with developing and programming an RPG is the complexity of the core systems. There is a lot of information that needs to be tracked and managed by the developers for the game to function properly. And the best part is, we're just getting started. To truly be a Final Fantasy clone, we will need to add status effects, namely poison, stone, darkness, paralysis, sleep, silence, and confusion to be exact. And each effect will need to be programmed and then interpreted by the battle system. The system will need to understand who is poisoned and apply damage at the end of each turn, and who is confused and roll the dice on their attack. There are also items, and although items might be simple, their effects still need to be programmed, such as a healing potion or a remedy. There's also progression and level up systems, so the game will need to store and handle that. A decent yet overlooked challenge in RPG design is displaying the right information to the player in a digestible manner. So developers will spend a lot of time figuring out a UI layout and maintaining the systems that display it. For each system that is added, there's probably a UI element attached to it somewhere. But remember, all of this was for a clone of an old RPG on the NES. Now modern RPGs, they're just built different. Modern RPGs have special abilities, and those usually have effects. And there are also passive abilities, which have effects that tie back to the player's skills. We have weakness charts like in Pokemon and Persona, and break systems like in Octopath and Final Fantasy VII Remake. There are more intricate status effects, detailed level progression, expansive skill trees, weapon abilities, magic systems, and crafting systems. And we never even talked about inventory management, menu functionality, storytelling, world building, NPC dialogue, map creation, particle effects, character relationships, and many more topics. One small thing you'll often find in a modern RPG is a turn preview. These give a small preview of the upcoming turns while also showing how your actions may affect the order. For example, it may show you the effects of casting a speed buff on the party. While little quality of life systems like this actually add quite a bit of complexity, because the system has to simulate numerous turns of battle and display it to the player, then revert back to its original state if the player decides to cancel it. One way of doing this from a programming point of view is by tracking a hidden value that is derived from the unit's speed stat. The game then creates the turn order by sorting these values. Each time it's a unit's turn, the current unit's turn's value is subtracted from everyone else's, and at the end of the turn, the stat is reset back to its original value, allowing the next unit to go. This process repeats over and over, but what complicates this is if the player uses a speed buff, for example, it will screw with the numbers and change the entire list. This information needs to be previewed to the player before committing. Now the issue isn't that the CPU can't handle these calculations, it does it very easily. The problem is it takes a programmer to iron out the details to get it right. For the player, these are features that work seamlessly, but I'm sure there was a developer that spent days if not weeks working out all the bugs that came with it. Trust me, I've tried this myself. So RPG development is not to be trifled with or taken lightly. However, it's not an impossible task. If you truly want to make an RPG and you're starting out as a developer, or even if you're a veteran and you're trying to tackle this solo, here's what I recommend. It sounds trivial, but simplify your game idea and really reel in your expectations. Focus on a really core aspect of an RPG and do it really well. Keep everything simple and restrain yourself from going down the rabbit hole of adding features from games just because you think it's cool. If you're going to add something to your game, it should have a meaningful purpose for the player. Keep the battle system as simple as possible and force yourself to design encounters that challenge the players with limited systems, rather than trying to add features just to try and have a deep battle system. A great example of this is a nice little indie title called Bug Fables. The game's core battle system is relatively simple, but the designers did a great job at creating fun encounters by giving each character a role in the party and having enemies that challenge each role, like having a character that hits flying enemies or a character that's good at absorbing damage. Remember that limitation breeds innovation. When you limit your design, it forces you to find creative ways to solve the problem. If you're going to add a new feature, really consider what that feature adds for the player and if it truly complements the overall goal for your game. RPG development is a beast, but with proper planning and scope creep management, you can overcome this behemoth of a genre and create your own little world worth exploring. With that said, I hope today's video shines some light on the challenges behind RPG development. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel for more insight on game development. Additionally, you can wishlist my own RPG, Project Bloom, on Steam. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.